You're listening to Seraphina Speaks for Children Who Think, the show that delivers you my take on topics that are important. I'm your host, Seraphina Melina Durbin. Let's go right ahead to the show, shall we? Today we're delving into the enchanted world of Disney, where dreams come true. Or do they? I'm Seraphina, your host, and we're going to take a celebratory, yet objective look at the beloved institution that's Disney. Seems to me that many people are scared to spoil the magic of Disney, so let's take a logical look at it, shall we? But of course with an obligatory sprinkle of pixie dust thrown in. The biggest Disney party ever is landing in London, UK, soon. The Walt Disney Archives are bringing their enormous exhibition, Disney 100, the exhibition, to celebrate 100 years of pure Disney fun. It's going to be a 20,000 square foot extravaganza. Imagine stepping into 10 totally cool themed galleries where you can relive all your favourite Disney stories. They'll have captivating tales, historical goodies, original costumes, and interactive stuff that will make visitors feel like they're part of the magic. It's a trip down memory lane and a history lesson, all rolled into one. Getting a sneak peek behind the curtain and seeing how the people at Disney bring our favourite characters, movies, shows and attractions to life will be a big treat. Apparently there'll be jaw-dropping memorabilia and never-before-seen artwork that will make us go wow. Disney 100 the exhibition is set to be legendary. But let's address the mouse in the room. Disney, with its iconic castles and catchy tunes, has been a cornerstone of so many childhoods. The place where dreams come true, princesses find their Prince Charmings, and talking animals steal the show. Ah, Disney. But is it all just happily ever afters? Or is there more bubbling beneath the surface? Hold on to your mouse ears, folks, because we're about to hack lightly into the walls of this enchanted castle. As much as I adore Disney, I can't help but notice a few, let's call them quirks, in their storytelling. Take, for example, the classic princess narratives. We've got damsels in distress, waiting for their knight in shining armour. Actually, while we're on this, please tell me you've noticed that Snow White is meant to be about 13 or 14. So why is a much older boy, the prince, kissing her? Isn't the age gap difference worrying? Take a look to see which Disney princesses end up with much, much older men. Then we've evil stepmothers, obsessed with beauty, and fairy godmothers, who seem to have a worrying idea of consent. Now, let's talk about love. Ah, love. The base of many a Disney tale. But here's the thing. Why is it always love at first sight? Can we just take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of falling head over glass slipper in love with someone you just met? Exactly. And don't even get me started on the whole happily ever after trope. Last time I checked, life doesn't magically resolve all its problems with a true love's kiss. Sorry, Disney, but I think we need to redefine what happily ever after truly means. Happily ever after is such a setup. It's something that catches girls' and women's imaginations, especially in false ways. Happily ever after is a lie. Maybe. Disney has been both praised and criticised for its portrayal of gender roles, stereotypes and representation. And it's certainly come a long way from the days of passive princesses waiting for their Prince Charming to rescue them. We've seen strong, independent characters like Mulan and Moana taking charge of their own destinies. But we can't ignore the lingering themes and stereotypes that still carry on in many Disney films. The damsel in distress narrative, the emphasis on physical appearance, and a lack of diverse representation are all issues that need addressing. Then there's those problems in the portrayal of love and romance in most Disney classics. Doesn't Disney have a responsibility to reflect the values of our society? And that includes promoting healthy relationship dynamics and consent. I asked my trusty triplet brother correspondents what their favourite Disney movie is. Here's Horatio with a surprise answer.
My favourite Disney movie is Free Guy.
How about Montgomery? What will he choose?
I'm not a big Disney fan. My favourite film is Free Guy, which I think wasn't originally a Disney movie.
Okay, so not your average Disney film there. Before I gently chew into Disney a bit more, here's a review on a podcast, but I'm doing something pretty different today. Meet my very special Disney correspondent, who I know is going to remind us all why Disney is a legend. This is so exciting. I wanted to hear her recommendation of a Disney podcast for us. Lauren introduces herself first, then moves on to her podcast recommendation.
Seraphina, thank you for thinking of me. I love your podcast and I can't believe I get to be on it. I love your questions. Okay, so my name is Lauren Passell. I am the founder of Tink Media, which is a podcast growth company, and I named it after Tinkerbell. And I also have 2 podcast newsletters, Podcast to the Newsletter, where I write about podcasts, and I interviewed you, Seraphina, and Podcast Marketing Magic, which is all about podcast marketing, but I make it fun. And I live in New York City with my husband, Justin, and my cat, Monty, and my daughter, Stella. She is almost a month old. Okay. Point Seraphina Speaks listeners to the best Disney podcast for tweens and teens. Okay, the podcast I want to recommend to Seraphina Speaks listeners is called Very Amusing. It's hosted by Carly Wiesel. She's a journalist who covers Disney events. She, before they happen, before things open, she covers all the food. She just knows everything. She knows everyone. And she has a unbridled enthusiasm for Disney. And trust me, when you listen to the show, you'll know it's like high energy, love, and appreciation for Disney. And she said something I really appreciate once about Disney adults like me, because sometimes people don't like Disney adults. They're like, grow up. They think it's pathetic that I like Disney, basically. And she just once she said, Disney adults are more elevated than non-Disney adults because they tap into this thing from their childhoods. And they see this kind of magic that other people don't see, and they let themselves do that. So, of course, she's, speaking to my soul. So I appreciate her. And she kind of does this thing where just like love and appreciation for Disney, nostalgic, but also like journalism about what is happening in the parks, how are they changing things, etc.
I thought we should listen to a clip of the podcast, Very Amusing, to hear what Lauren is talking about. I chose this clip from a recent episode called What I Learnt from My First Time at Disney World with a Baby. Lauren will be taking Stella, her new daughter, there soon, surely.
Hello! And welcome to Very Amusing, your one-stop shop for the stories, secrets, and shenanigans of a popcorn-fueled theme park journalist. I'm Carly Wiesel. A big bit of advice I have for you, maybe the most important takeaway I have, is that when you're in the park, clean your baby's hands as often as you clean yours. Now, I always am using an antibacterial goo when I'm in the park. I touch things all the time. I try to keep my hands clean because I'm always eating snackies. But it's not really built into the baby protocol to wipe their little hands unless they're eating or they stick them in something gooey. But heed my advice, because this is 1,000% how I got very, very, very sick. Pearl touched the lap bars, touched the vehicles, touched everything. And while I kept my hands clean, I forgot the babies stick the tiny hands directly into your mouth. So she essentially touched a lap bar and then shoved it right in a germ hole in my face. I was sick for 4 days when I got home. It's the sickest I've been in years. Pearl was sick for, I want to say like 6 hours. She just had one really, really bad night of sleep and then was totally fine. But for me, I'm just going to tell you from what I lived through, make sure you wipe their hands with wipes.
Oh my, Lauren is right. That's a high energy podcast. Thank you for that recommendation. Tune in to hear more. I've got a feeling listening to Very Amusing will be like being on the Splash Mountain ride. I want to hear more from Lauren. Her Disney enthusiasm is contagious.
When did you become a Disney fan? I always loved Disney, the classic cartoon movies. I think when I was a little girl, I watched Sleeping Beauty on repeat. And I went to the park when I was 5 with my parents, and we didn't have a lot of money. And I remember thinking, well, this is my Disney trip. I remember thinking if you're lucky, you get to go once and that's it. And we didn't go for a really, really, really long time. And went back when I was 13. And that is when actually the Disney obsession really started to kick in, actually, when I was older. And I started going with my mom, and it was just the two of us. And sometimes my dad would come, but it was really this thing that my mom and I would do together. And it was really special because it was like an adventure every time, just me and my mom, like a mother-daughter trip. And we started just getting really nerdy about all the rides, or learning facts, just really immersing ourselves, learning everything we could before we went. So I would say it really kicked in when I was 13.
What I adore about this is that Lauren's love of Disney didn't kick in properly till she was in her teens. I made up that she was obsessed since she was maybe 3. It's so sweet to hear how Disney trips became her and her mum's thing. I'm feeling lucky we have Lauren to Disneyfy up this pretty serious episode.
What is it about Disney that captivates you and is now an enduring passion in your life? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, I think that Disney does everything right. They do things with perfection. From everything from the cleanliness of the parks to the ideas, to the details, the level of detail in all of the rides, the architecture, the music, the smells. They think of everything and they make it happen. They don't cut corners on creativity. Wow. That really sums it up, why I love it. There's other reasons, it's nostalgic for me. When I go to Disney World or think about Disney, or even wear one of my Disney t-shirts, I'm taking myself back to when I was a kid with my mom in the park. And, I should probably talk to a therapist about this, but it was a time in my life when everything was really simple and safe and happy before adult world came. So it reminds me of when I was a kid, I think. So there's that. Also, I have been called a kidult. I'm kind of a kid at heart, I guess you would say. I was voted eternal kindergartner in high school when I was a senior in high school in my class. I just love being silly and acting like a kid and not taking myself too seriously. And also I love the idea of Disney magic and just everything seeming possible.
I'm wondering what an afternoon with Lauren in New York would be like. I can be silly too. Just today I was on stage in a play, and all I could do was giggle. I fluffed my lines because I was laughing so much. I managed to say just one word, then launched myself off stage.
What should Disney be doing next? Share your hopes and biggest Disney dream. That is a great question. Okay, I'll make a fun one and a more serious one. I think they should be making podcasts using Disney IP. Disney and podcasts are my two favorite things. The idea of combining them makes me so excited I might faint. But, on a more serious note, they've made some changes in the park that I do not like. They have this app that you have to use to get on rides. And I just always am thinking, what about the kid whose mom doesn't have a smartphone? They don't have the advantage of getting on the rides that they want like everybody else. And they now charge extra for getting on rides early. And they've kind of gamified the park and everyone's walking around with their heads down and their cell phones. And I kind of miss the days where you could just go and like wander and stumble upon something and you don't have to time everything out and plan so far ahead. And I think what Disney should be doing next is going back to their roots a little bit and simplify things and let people discover and make it a place for discovery and not constant planning. Oh, one more thing. I think they should hire me and make me a cast member, which, by the way, they call anyone who works for them cast members, whether you work at a Disney store in Ohio or whether you are Tinkerbell in Orlando. So I want to be a cast member someday. I want to work with them in any capacity. And when I'm old, I want to retire in Disney World. I will be a janitor if I have to. And I already told my husband to pick out a job because that's the plan. Thank you.
It's clear as a Tinkerbell that Lauren isn't destined to be a janitor at Disney. I expect to see her as a cast member somewhere, sometime, one day. Thank you, Lauren, for coming on my show. You're a blast. Don't listen to the rest of what I say, as I'm about to say things that will hurt your Disney heart. One of the criticisms of the Disney machine is what's called cultural appropriation and whitewashing in some Disney films. This includes stereotypical portrayal of non-white characters, including racism. Disney has had to add content advisory notices to several of its classics, including Dumbo, Peter Pan, and The Aristocrats. This is what it says. This program includes negative depictions and/or mistreatment of people or cultures. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Wow, you got that right. Mistreatment of people or cultures. Let's take the Disney narrative of Indigenous people. The way Disney do this is to falsify and water down the reality in order to create guilt-free entertainment. Disney has definitely made big improvements in recent years with films like Coco and Raya and The Last Dragon, but there's still work to be done. It's not all bad among the glitter and tiaras either. There are glimmers of hope. Despite problems with culture, characters like Mulan defy gender norms to save China, or Moana, who goes on a daring voyage to save her people. They remind us that at least princesses can be so much more than just pretty faces in ball gowns. If we circle back to the business side of Disney, oh boy, where do I even begin? With theme parks that cost an arm and a leg to visit? Sorry, Lauren, I've not been, but if someone gave me a ticket, I'd adore to go, but there's no way we can afford it. And merchandise that fills entire warehouses. Disney isn't just a company, it's a cultural force to be reckoned with. Disney's dominance in the entertainment industry gives it huge power to shape cultural norms and values. From the toys children play with, to the messages we absorb from movies and TV shows, Disney's reach is vast. Please don't imagine I'm anti-Disney. Despite its flaws, Disney holds a special place in many of our hearts. We know Lauren is a super fan, and she loves Disney, but not as much as she loves her new daughter. It's obvious that Disney brings joy to millions around the world, myself included. From iconic songs that get stuck in our heads, to the timeless characters that feel like old friends, there's no denying the magic of Disney. So here's to Disney, with all its quirks and contradictions. May we critique, celebrate, and yes, sing along to Let It Go at the top of our lungs. A huge thank you to my special Disney correspondent Lauren for joining me today. Listeners, listen to the Behind the Scenes Bulletin episode on this week's topic. I have another amazing special Disney correspondent, David Semanoff, telling us all about his love for Disney. Then he shares his top tips for going to Disney World. You've got to hear those, they're so good. If you're enjoying Seraphina Speaks, please consider supporting the podcast by subscribing to my Substack to gain access to my exclusive digital library of bonus content and more. Put the word Seraphina Speaks Substack into your search engine and it'll come up. I write social commentary on ordinary topics we take for granted. It's an extension of this podcast. If you'd like to get more involved in this podcast, why don't you join my correspondent team? All you have to do is post a review for the show on your fave podcast app. Then take a screenshot and send it to me at seraphina@seraphinaspeaks.com. Then I'll be in touch with you about being on the show. By the way, if you're looking for an idea of what to say in your review, if you're like me, you go blank, even though you want to do this. Here's a question for you. Let me know what country you're listening from and what you'd like me to talk about in a future episode. Next week's episode is called On Failure. It's also the last episode of this season. What better topic to close on? Whether you try not to fail or embrace it as a given. I hope you'll join me. Until next time, keep questioning what you take for granted. This is Seraphina signing off. Take care. Wow, I hope you enjoyed the show, everybody. If you like what you hear, click the subscribe button. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to leave me a review at iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, because then more people can find my podcast.